Dear colleagues, we are happy to welcome you today in our room at Moscow Financial Forum. It's a unique platform which on annual basis gathers together experts in finance, economy, and we discuss in a kind of open dialogue all the issues of different kind, and today's session is dedicated to the issue which on one hand is related to the financial area, but on the other hand we want to view the labor efficiency from different perspective, from the point of view of mindset, from the point of view of culture, from the point of view of non-material stimulus. And in order to start this theme, we have invited speakers who are ready to openly share their practices, their experience, and during this dialogue, I hope we'll manage to find some new interesting approaches and actually discuss possible ways of solving these problems. And in order to start, I would like to introduce our speakers. Piotr Zaselsky, Deputy Minister of Economical Development of the Russian Federation. Please welcome. Maxim Reshetnikov, Governor of Perm region. Nikolai Solomon, Director General of Federal Center of Competences. Maria Glukhova, Vice President of Russian Union of Entrepreneurs and Industry Makers. Alexei Komissarov, Co-Chair of Central Co-Author of ONF, Russia, Country of Opportunities, and Evgeny Yeskin, Director on Staff, Division of Severstal, Russian Steel. So it's not by chance that we have such a range of speakers invited today. Just to consider labor efficiency and discuss mindset can be from different ways. There are initiatives from the state at specific region level, at the level of companies as well. And in order to start today, well, probably the fact that labor efficiency is influenced not only by material stimulus, not only by financial measures, but by non-material measures as well. And in order to start our dialogue, I would like to ask Piotr Zaselsky to speak about what kind of initiatives at the level of state exist today. What is the situation with the task? What is happening today? And actually, from the point of view of non-financial measures, to describe our theme. Thank you, Ekaterina. Good morning, dear colleagues. First of all, a little bit about a national project. Labor efficiency and support of employment. Well, we have a task to reach annual labor efficiency growth 5%, starting with 2024, cover 10,000 companies all over the country, and to focus on some basic non-raw materials industries. This is processing industry, agriculture, transportation, construction, and we are going to sign commodities. And what I'm going to tell you, labor efficiency is quite a measurable result, but it does depend on some constructor, on some components, and on the level of developed geographically and otherwise communal connections, communications. It depends on the level of managerial staff, on their education, on the level of technical provision of the company, and from lots of other things. And our task is to try to get this constructor together, and the main track specified in national projects, namely their correct correlation and combination, will make it possible for us to reach new level of production. Well, you see that the tasks are very ambitious, and today we would like to speak about one of the components which are called working with human capitals. And in my opinion, it is really very important. All the others are very important, and this one is important as well, because we are all people. We work somewhere for somebody, and what we are doing is consumed by someone. So people are always around. So within the frames of working with human capital, we can ask questions. how does that influence, for instance, to the level of corporate culture or organizational culture of the company? How does it influence labor efficiency? And there are different opinions, totally different opinions. Somebody says that this is 20%, the share in overall growth of labor efficiency. But this is a particular opinion. Sometimes this can make 100% when the component is closer to 100%. It can vary, but nobody argues that corporate culture, work with employees, some well-established system can result to very good achievements. Well, I can say that experience of communication with companies, my experience in life, and the experience of research I've made shows that in most of the companies of our group, labor efficiency, well, basically is not thought over properly, and working with human capital, to be quite honest, is the situation with that is even worse. That very organizational culture which we want to bring in exists some kind of chaotically, kind of set of rules and regulations existing of the company, and it's not systematized at all. So I know how I should do, how I should not do at the level of intuition, not at the level of documents. And within the frames of one of the direction of national project on training of managerial staff, we have developed a program, leader of efficiency in Ministry of Economical Development of Russian Academy of International Trade. Within this very training program, there is one track related to working with human capital. And we would like to bring home to top managers of the company, to shareholders, some of the rules, constructions which could be applied for taking this source from people. It's not a secret, and it will be elaborated later on, that there is quite a large quantity of different achievements at the companies which should be promoted by the very staff. And how to combine all that, how to strive for the process to be continuous. Well, that is our task, to bring this home to top management. My experience from banking sphere proves that without strong will of the leader of the company, and strong will is a very important phrase here. So only with that we can reach a result, but it will be very heavy. It should be systematic work. It should be supported all the time. All the values should be supported that he wants to bring home to others. And only by personal example, he or she can prove that the system really works. Once again, researches prove that in most of Russian companies, the system of declared values and real values differ. Very often companies say that we need to do this or that thing. They have applied some beautiful boards and they told about the rules of the company, and they do not follow these rules. After some time, of course, this construction will fall apart and the result will be zero. And within the frames of our activity, we would like to establish a system of methodological recommendations and also introduce them into the group. This is work with the staff, work with talents, work with youth, adaptation of tutorship, some kind of financial stimulation, so some comprehensive measures that could have been applied. It doesn't mean that we should start applying for it right away, but some of the elements should be implemented step by step, depending on the size of the company. The bigger is the company, the more elements we can implement. Well, namely, that's what I was going to speak about, and thanks to the colleagues who participate in our session today, I think that we are going to have different opinions because we represent different groups. Federal bodies, thanks to Maxim Gennadievich, thanks to you, colleagues, and everyone who works with human capital. And I'm happily giving the floor to my colleagues. Well, before we move on, together with the speaker and with organizers of this event, we have actually taken a very complicated task to speak at financial forum with you, with the leaders who actually are heads of some economical services or perform general kind of managerial work. We were brave enough to start this theme regarding non-financial part and start discussing that. And in order for me to give the floor to our honorable speakers, first of all, I would like to understand your opinion, being participants of today's discussion present in the room. And for that reason, I would like to ask you to answer our first poll. The code of the poll is 2419. Please use your mobile applications. Find this poll. Has everyone managed to download this application? Are you successful with inputting the code? Well, what do we want to ask you about? The question is like this. What, in your opinion, influenced the growth of labor efficiency in the most important way? And we would like you to make a choice as managers, as top managers, and give us a hint. What exactly? Cheap financing, training of staff and tutorship, digitalization, removal of administrative barrier, non-material stimulation, material stimulation, development of culture of high labor efficiency. Please make your choice for this poll, and we'll ask our speakers to comment upon the results. So we are really interested in how the audience reacts towards that. Well, possibly we could have added something, but we already have some points. Well, technical novelties. Well, if you are for that, then please vote for digitalization. We'll understand that that is related. Well, the thing is that if you are speaking about your program, about thinking, but if we add something, then it will be even more comprehensive. Technical progress. And I would like to ask organizers to show us the results. So, digitalization and development of culture of high labor efficiency. Culture won over digitalization. Piotr, I would like to ask you to comment upon that. We thought that digitalization would win. Well, what can I say? It happens that actually the theme was correct. That, culture, our product is directed at changing culture of production, and development of culture wins here because everything follows culture. Culture is different. People treat work differently. They try to understand what can be perfected. Of course, we cannot go without technical novelties, and when people understand how to prompt what should be changed, then we understand what should be automatized, what should be digitalized, and so on and so forth. So I can say that I'm satisfied with the poll results. Digitalization is in trend. It is seen all over the country. And by the way, cheap financing, it's not for the first time that it's not very interesting for people. It's not the first forum that we see just that it's worth nothing. The results are really curious, and what was elaborated by Piotr about initiatives that exist from the behalf of the state, there are quite lots of these initiatives. They are totally different, and actually it's not only at the level of the state overall, but also at the level of specific regions. And one of the regions which started implementing methods was Perm region. Maxim, I would like to listen to your opinion. Tell me, please, are there any specific tasks from the regions related to labor efficiency? What is the situation in your region? What have you managed to achieve? What are your plans for the future? Where are you going to? So, good morning. Well, good morning, I believe still. Of course, Perm region was one of the first to go into the project of labor efficiency in 2017. First companies went along this way. We have experience accumulated. For today, 55 companies are involved, and up to the end of the year, 14 more due to their KPI will join us, and overall that will be 140 companies. What do we see for the companies which are already far ahead? The growth of labor efficiency like 15 or 20% average, and for separate operations there are like 30 or 40 or even 50%. We can see the figures. But the main thing is that the growth of a salary is 2 times as much as inflation rate growth. So we see average growth of salary. It's not only the project for efficiency. Normally, a growth of efficiency must be accompanied with the growth of loading of the company. So we support the same companies for the export of production, for the cooperation with the largest companies in a raw material area. We have a program to promote production of our companies to large raw material giants like Gazprom, Lukoil, Russian railways, Russian networks, and so on and so forth. So that altogether helps us to reach this kind of parameters. What is good and what is different for the project of labor efficiency? Well, I'm in state management for 20 years, and as far as I remember, this is the first project when the state risked to finance consulting for the benefit of the companies in such amounts, in such scale, and the first one when the companies actually reacted properly to that. So we see true cooperation because these 55 companies, it's not the result that they were made to do this by governors and there were kind of repressions. No, there is a totally different situation. The first 2 or 3, then others saw the results and the process started to move on, and now it's a kind of an avalanche character. What else I should mention? Well, for 2.5 years, we have a true culture being created due to the fact that half of the projects are actually only training. On the one hand, we have consulting centers. Many of them are from Perm. First, we had Federal Center of Competences. Then the colleague trained our specialists, and they got certification by correlating organizations. And in Perm, we got our own staff involved into this process. Moreover, some of the universities in their chairs recover this influence of labor efficiency. And for 2 years, 2018 and 2019, more than 11,000 people were trained, or they will complete their training by the end of the year. Last year, we have trained 5,500, and this year, 6,000 people. And the program were established upon the request of the companies. The programs are related to labor efficiency, to automatization of production, to correct arrangement, all these modern lean technologies, and so on and so forth. So that is kind of an adult request, I should say. And when we understand that we have 11,000 people who will go through this, it means that this culture has true chance to get stronger. It's not only enthusiast, but it is kind of deep penetration for all the sphere. And I should say that this project, it's not as if it's successful, but well, actually it is successful. Then we'll make scaling of this project. We have to keep track of that to get stronger and to increase the scale. But what we would like to say immediately, the project for today changes the culture, but it quite deeply changes the situation in a limited sector. Normally it's industry. Well, yes, today agriculture is trying to keep up with, and for the transportation area the penetration is not so good. For construction area it's not so commodities area, the level of penetration is limited. It's out of the question that we'll have some industrial issues, but for sure we need to involve the sphere with lowest production, social sphere, social services, medical services, educational services, legal services, no matter how wild it can sound today. But these are the spheres where we have huge employment. And if we just consider it from the point of view of production of VAT, very low VAT for one employee. And I should say that for the perimeters of the project, outside the perimeters of the project, the state thinks about this. There is a famous project related to medicine. This project is about that. At the example of this project, we have creatively reconsidered main ideas, and at the basis of polyclinics, we have taken 20% patients more. We have just rearranged the process. We have changed internal logistics. in polyclinics, and we have changed parameters of work of doctors, and we have made necessary repairs for that. So for 2 years we have implemented this product, plus 20%. I would like to emphasize once again, it's only on polyclinics. There are also hospital, social services objects. Moreover, there is a task that, well, it's not kind of abstract task, but let's take a sphere of general education. For the next 10 years, 8 or 10 years, up to 25% will see the growth of staff in our school. This is the demography.
We already have this problem with the kindergarten, but at the same time we have to understand that it's going to be more and more. And apparently we can see that we're not going to provide for such many places. We need to have a scope of finance for that matter, just to cope with this demographical wave. And unfortunately we do understand that we're not going to have that much money to do that. And at the same time we need to understand that we're going to have 2 more shifts of this, and we need to cope with it more and more. And the situation is going to be even more critical in different cities. How are we going to tackle that? If we look at our schools, then we understand that we have a lot of premises that are not used to its full extent. We need to understand that we need some recreational area, etc., just to use it efficiently. We also have libraries with a lot of books that are not really used that much, and a lot of regions are thinking about that, but they also have their own solutions. They are taking their own solutions. What I'm talking about, I just mean to say that if we talk about this particular thing, we will understand that we need to understand that there are points that can be improved. And now that our industry is more or less normal, and we've found some approaches, the right approaches, we need to understand that these regions can be different in terms of their vision. And for example, if we talk about the Perm region, then probably they have their own approach, but at the same time they can be quite efficient at that. And since we also have different regions that that want to work with in line with the state approach and also state, then I think that it takes certain courage to analyze the efficiency of our efficiency. For example, in the framework of our projects, we have quite a number of different information systems and projects, and very often they are quite overloaded, and even though that we're trying to get rid of those paperwork, but at the same time still the information needs to be coped. It needs to be somehow processed in an efficient way. I think that we are responsible for that. There is representatives for the states, etc., and we need to really keep it in mind. Apart from that, I think that this project is really fine, is really nice, and it brings us to a new level. Maxim, can I just jump in with a short question? Well, you know that at the level of the regions, you have quite. Can you hear me? Microphone is working, or can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm trying to speak louder. No, I just wanted to speak a little bit more about that. So we're now talking about productivity as a way of thinking. Well, it sometimes happens that you have been doing something for quite a while, but you understand that people have changed their minds. And have it ever occurred to you when you saw that I tried to implement a new thing and it really changed people's approach, mentality, their stance, their attitude towards some things? Could you come up with any of such examples? Maybe, for example, this lean manufacturer, lean pharmacies, when it really echoed back, and when people said that it really changed our approach, when I feel that I'm a real customer of a polyclinic. I think that it mostly can be applied to some production premises. I don't think that right now that the factories they really think about that. It's true that we managed to attract a lot of pharmacists as well as doctors. We try to attract them to our work, and now they are feeling more and more engaged, and we are not doing it in a centralized way. I mean, in different establishments, no, we just try to disseminate this idea, and it's really great that they feel like they really want to take this idea on board. And in case you visit such polyclinics on a payable basis, then you understand that something really changed. But it takes a step-by-step approach. And of course, it has a direct impact on the productivity itself. It's not everywhere, but still we can feel this impact. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, I went to Gansk Krai, quite a remote area. Now it is quite available in terms of transportation, and I remember how I got it. It was quite difficult. We had to cross the Kama River, etc. And I remember I communicated different issues with schools and kindergarten, etc. And I was trying to discuss different changes that happened. And when we look at those establishments, yes, we understand that now it looks much better. And I remember that woman told me that we had different canteen blocks and also and it is really changing, even though that the salary is quite low. But I can see that the changes already are there. They're trying to optimize those changes that really have a direct impact of their productivity. I would say that it is has an pervasive influence. But when you think about culture, it's not just something that can be used in a flexible way. No, it can be used like a sponge that can have a direct impact on different spheres, but in a long-term perspective. And I don't think that actually if you have a certain initiative within a period for 2021, still you have to understand that it takes time to do that. Just to get ready for this session, we had a certain questionnaire for over 1,000 respondents. We collected very precious information, and also we tried to analyze how they answered different questions. So we have different speakers and also data that should be analyzed in the framework of this session. Could you please comment on that? The first question that was addressed is what really has a direct impact on our productivity. And yes, we talked about motivation, about mentality, about perception of different things. I think this is one of the factors that has direct impact on productivity. In this sense, I would like to ask you, Maria Glukhova, one question. I would like you to comment on this result. I think that you, like never else, you know that we have different practices. We know how to motivate employees, but at the same time, we understand that that our practice is one of the best, but how can we use it in the most efficient ways? Well, I absolutely agree with you. This questionnaire is very interesting, and I think that in the very first part, we didn't talk that much about that block about technologies, and for some reason it was not ranked that highly. But at the same time, I can see that still this is a step forward. We think about self-fulfillment. We think about how people can move forward in terms of their motivation, and more companies they think more about productivity and make it a part of their corporate culture, which is really important. And we decided to talk about this with different companies. We understand that we have like over 50% of small and medium-sized corporations, but at the same time we see that 2/3 of the companies, these companies already have certain programs, certain projects that are dedicated to productivity, which is really important. And it only means that productivity is part of their strategy is already a part of their corporate strategy, but it is not always implemented in the true sense of this word, which is unfortunately not the case. And I think that we somehow stumbled somewhere at the top level, and we were very much surprised that the system, for example, that is one MP, for example, is only integrated in the upper level, but at the same time we understand that certain elements need to be implemented with different stages, a little bit later or different stages, etc. For example, different stimulus, impetus, etc. But it's not always the case. At least we can state that companies are really interested in saying that we need to think about it. And for example, deficit of good employees is a great problem, and they think about it. We do really lack people of certain competences and skills, and it has been the case starting from 2008. We don't have enough skilled professionals, and it's problem that have no pervasive influence all around the business world, and we are here to try to implement different educational programs, projects, etc. But at the same time, we want to do something to understand what is happening inside the companies, just to think what we can do about this shortage of the deficit that is there in the companies. And now we are exposed to a number of blocks, problems that we need to do something about. For example, educational problems, etc. We know that some companies they try to provide some educational programs for their employees, but at the same time the quality of such programs leaves a lot to be desired, unfortunately. And I think that they need to focus more on the most interesting cases, on the most important ones, and they sometimes think only about some, foreign programs, which is not always relevant to the practice of the companies, and especially when it comes to the practice of the company. But how can we tackle with that issue? We need to do something, and we need to think about the fact that sometimes it takes different approach, a different culture, a different technological approach, and when people come back to their working place, they do not always know how to use their knowledge. As a result, they cannot find themselves in the upper level. No, instead they find themselves somewhere else, and they cannot really use their approach at a very low level. And yes, we have such companies, for example, at Silverstal. They have very successful cases, and they try to do their best to make sure that their productivity should be kept at the highest level. And thus, for example, we can see that a lot of companies have very interesting cases in the educational sphere. When companies they start to work with different domains in the educational sphere, and starting from the school step, they try to communicate with people there. They try to do something to change their approach, to change their mentality. try to change something in terms of how they treat all that. And this is something that helps a lot in the regions, and this kind of approach helps to really boost the potential, to boost productivity. So now we're trying to create a laboratory, school, or I mean, in different educational establishments. We understand that it really will help us to attract new specialists, new professionals in different sectors, which is really important. Another important point that is related to the best practice. We communicated with Mineco, and we understand that it is not always applied to small and medium-sized enterprises, but at the same time, something that they have already achieved can be already applied in different regions. Part of the methodology and documents can be used in the different locations, and that's why I suggest that Mineco should really take a close look at this, at the experience that has been accumulated specifically for regions. We have a feeling that we have a certain impetus for motivation for developing further educational programs, which is really important and could play a very important role in our work. It could be really efficient, it could be really important. So, as far as I understood that, the Ministry for the Economic Development is now focusing on that. They're focusing on implementation of this kind of projects, and specifically for small and medium-sized enterprises. And later on, I also share some of the results that have been achieved in this domain, and we'll be talking about the so-called educational track and working with employees. But we have not been limited by that. We decided to move even further, and we decided to think even more about our thinking about mentality and the way we should perceive this information, something that could have a direct impact on the productivity. We had quite a number of options for respondents, but we also analyzed the so-called indifferent approach to some of the results that can be achieved, and we saw that over 1,700 respondents actually were quite unsatisfied with the result. Nikolai, you were one of the first to implement this kind of practice at the regional level, and I think that you could comment on whether or not some of such a practice can be applied at such a level. Could you please share your experience and comment on this somehow? Well, I would say that this question is quite complicated. I think that something good that is happening is, of course, always to our mercy. It should be implemented. But I don't think that at the same time negative practices can be analyzed properly without it further. I'm quite often asked this question whether or not we have this problem with indifference, and it's always the case. You know, when we have a different approach to something, it doesn't matter whether you're professional or not, whether you are an expert, etc. But at the same time, if you remain indifferent, it could be a great problem, and we understand that this is a very important criteria. And in this case, we understand that the second important criteria is proactive stance, special mentality, special attitudes. We also need to have some basic motivation at the economic level. We understand that not so many enterprises and plans have such a point on their agenda. And sometimes we see that motivation simply disappears. We don't really understand how to motivate people, how to invite them to do something. And very often consultants, for example, say that we have this top-to-bottom approach does not really work, and it cannot really motivate employees. We just mean to say that I think that it will be more efficient and more important to somehow change our approach and to understand how to motivate people who have already experience of 10, 15 years of experience. Can you imagine that when someone is taken on board with a huge experience, just a simple worker, but he cannot be motivated in the true sense of this word? I think that we need to somehow transfer this cultural meaning, but it can be done only by eye contact. You need to think about this motivation and also think about euphoria, how it should be done in the true sense of this word, how it can be transferred from one person to another. And now the culture is as following. We have a lot of employees, and we understand that we have a great number of staff, but they are not properly motivated. We have over 40 million people working for different enterprises, but how can they stay positive? How can they be motivated? How they can be a little bit intrigued and inspired by other specialists?
And then a large number of people start for 3, 4, or 5 years in the company. That is the period when they should do it very methodologically. Thank God we'll turn over the equator, and we want our staff to get penetrated with this culture, to accept, to understand, to wish and to do. So just to understand is not enough. There is the staff which can understand everything, but which can fail to have some proactive position, and also there is indifference that is also here. And then the results are zero. So eye to eye, yes, address support. We go to companies and training only as an element, training only as an assistance in solving some specific tasks, which is identified right at the point. And otherwise, it's only proactive communication, proactive position, and transfer of knowledge and skills. So we're all for leaders among governors like Maxim Gennadievich, so I actually have nothing to add. And after Petr Vladimirovich and after all other speakers, after Masha, so everyone understands this culture in the same way, and we have to do a trifle thing every day, everyone at his or her position, convincing his staff, simple people in the street, just to speak, and bring it to everyone. Only this way, at specific examples, at examples of specific results, small steps, projects of 3 months, 6 months, to explain that these are not only words, but the words confirmed by true business. These wonders of careful production is in your hand, that you can do it not only at work, but also at home to help your families, wives, and children. The main thing is not to be careful and not to bring work to your home, but it's truly strong culture which you can come across to, and should not wait for that to happen very fast. Do not dismiss people. Do not dismiss people for them not to understand that immediately. Otherwise, all our small Russian 120 million staff will be divided into groups, those who should be thrown away from the job. But wait, they need to work somewhere. Toyota does not dismiss anyone. Even if a person does not fit, there will be a position for him where he'll be useful. But you cannot find in a person where he would not be useful, because the range from the level of a staff or a manager, top manager, or some staff doing some small things, it's also important job that should be provided to people, and we should thank them for taking this job. So with these kind of good intentions, I should say that, well, yes, unindifference, yes, a proactive position. Well, that's it. Yes, thank you very much. Well, actually, we really considered it in general and asked our respondents whether you have projects related to labor efficiency or efficiency in general. And our poll showed that, of course, in most of the companies, these initiatives are present. But at that, to what extent they are implemented and which they face from is an issue of our further on research, our dialogue, and so on and so forth. Now I would like to give the floor to Evgeny Yeskin so that he would speak about practices of Severstal, and Nikolai has touched upon a very important thing. Toyota, Japan, you also had practices when via different kind of thinking you implemented all that. Please share the experience of Severstal, which has gone through that and make a breakthrough in that, and now they are at a different stage of development. So, dear colleagues, good morning. I was quite surprised that we do not have a full room. I believed that this is a very urgent theme, but I'm sure that whoever came are very interested in that. Just a couple of figures. Severstal is a metallurgical company, quite active company. We were always involved into labor efficiency, and in Soviet time, as you can remember, but they were mostly involved into material motivation in order to decrease number of staff and increase amounts of production. We can calculate labor efficiency in different ways. Someone calculates thousands of rubles per person, and we get oriented for the ton of produced goods for a person. And there is not only increase of production for us, but we have created culture of production in order that with the capacities, with the equipment, we would provide maximum amount of production or services. Starting from 2009, for the last 10 years, the amount of production with the same equipment, these are converters, for instance, increased by 9.5 million, and this year we plan to cover 11,300,000. That is 33%, 19%. So figures. In 2019, we were around 36.5 thousand people, and this year we are going to reach 24,400 people. That is 33% decrease. If we share tons by the number of people, the growth of labor efficiency made 77%. At that, it's 7th year that we are deeply involved in that, because what is the growth of labor efficiency? This is increase of intensity of labor and resistance of staff. Well, it was absolutely correctly mentioned, from a worker till the leader, measuring involvement with the Hewitt company. We work for 2 years. Without them, we have established our own methodology. Why it was important to take this methodology from some consulting company? Because it's always important to compare yourself with something, because your involvement is always good or bad. We started from 44%, it was 2012, and now the involvement is 33%. Further on, it will be more complicated. And I really liked that at one of the discussion with one of the leaders of the company, when we were talking to him, the main problem is when you want to lose weight. You lost weight, and after some time you will gain weight. So the figures tend to have this thing, and you decrease the number of staff, and then it gets increasing, and you must sustain that, and you can sustain them only sustaining the culture. What's important? We never educated people with some special tools of efficiency increase. We involved people into the processes which we implemented. And if there is a group of labor efficiency, there will be workshop workers. And otherwise, there are 2 people from a staff directorate or some working group, people who work in the workshop, people who individually led this project, and then they had to do nothing. They elaborated that, and they had to implement that. Please don't be afraid of changing stuff. I asked, which is the average age of chief of workshops? Chief of workshops in an industrial company is 3rd level of management. The person who is leading a department like 400 or 600 people, he would have experts subordinate to him, masters and workers. So for the last 3 years, the chiefs of workshop, 78 people, and 48 were replaced. Somebody got better position or different position, somebody left, and average age of chief workshops is 42 years. If we remove 2 of them, only 2 workshop chiefs who work more than 20 years, then average age will be 37 ages. This is a metallurgical company. And speaking about labor efficiency, well, I was told that there will be a lot of financial people. Today, Severstal has labor efficiency due to the point, and maybe it's not the main factor, but still, we are the most efficient metallurgical company in the world. We have the highest indicator for EBITDA, including in Russia, in the world. What else I would like to say? Training. We had trainings, we have methodological recommendations, and I have brought it with me. If somebody is interested, we can look around, and these are the tools that we used for the last 20 years. It was important to establish culture of leadership, culture of responsibility. How we can create culture of responsibility? Well, first of all, we came in like 5 or 6 years back, we switched to a fashionable flat structures. We had 9 levels of management, and now we have 5 levels of management. So the most important book for me was Requisite Organization. People tell me that this is an outdated book of 60s or 50s. I assure you that if you take what you need, this is a very good tool which will help you to increase your labor of efficiency. So it goes very fast from top to down. Communication, personal example, and involvement. We have removed production director from the Soviet times. The production director is a position which can't be removed. And when we removed this, we were told, are you removing director on production? And we said, no, we give you 5 directors. And we have 5 directors on production who not only have liabilities, but also responsibility. And this is the effect of these people, not one with 3 deputies, but with 5 directors who are directly subordinate to Director General. They have responsibility for what they do and for this result. It's very important to make ambitious targets. And it's a very interesting fact. Maybe you agree with me. Whenever we say, what is your target for labor efficiency growth? In 90% of cases, they say 30%. What kind of magical figure it is, nobody can explain. Everybody says 30% was put forward by top management. Actually, we have already put forward this target. And the most important thing that we keep on monitoring that as a benchmark. And when we had to go to these plants. We had plants in the USA where labor efficiency was twice as much as it is now. When we came to see with our own eyes how the process is arranged, also from functional point of view, functional directory. And when I came here, I requested figures. How efficiency is measured for functional people, so how much of your staff for one employee. If somebody has industrial company, today HR, together with the Unified Service Center, for us is 1 to 93. Compare your figures. The same approaches, the same tools, the same, with some small details, belong to functional directories. Training is very important. Leadership training. There is a program which was started to reach more together from top management downwards. And once I was told by a workshop chief, I was there a master, and then I became staff director. And I was told by him that he feels like he was studying in Moscow. The training was in Moscow, and he said, I still feel like I'm being bought. 4 days, 4 modules in best hotels of Moscow. Well, Alexei Mordashov comes to me telling me that how good it would be to live this way, that it would be good to work this way, that workers are the main power, the worker is the one without whom we won't produce anything good. We shouldn't think that we're so clever and all the rest are not so clever. We're all like that. Looks like, well, on the one hand, you are not bought. On the other hand, you are partially bought. They buy your involvement and they buy your leadership. And after that, chiefs of a workshop, 48 were replaced out of 78. And these are the drivers which are leading the process. We are just providing assistance. We are watching from the side and provide some help. Well, they say that we need lots of finance. Well, we didn't involve any finance. There were only kind of automatization, and we should understand that the cost of labor is so that considerable automatization will not provide payback. Of course, you could hear about a company. We make 11.5 million tons of steel, and we have 24.5 million thousand people, and they make 48.5 thousand tons of steel, and that is the level of automatization. And we exchange data on salary. Of course, there were different positions, and it was quite clear that they have much more opportunities, economical opportunities, because all that is related to economy. Evgeny, thank you very much for these figures, for these good examples. Of course, there are lots of practices that you are using in Severstal, and I would like to specify such a point. Well, it was really a long way that a company is going through, and you confirm the efficiency with specific figures. But however, being HR, a person who is leading this process, is there anything which, from the point of view of way of thinking, really works for production level, but nevertheless, even for this long way, you didn't manage to reach in the minds and hearts of people? Somewhere Severstal is working at something, and regardless of this long way and these beautiful figures, still you have something to work with as the stuff is concerned. How do you view this? Two most important things here. The first one is feedback and dialogues about the purposes with the workers. Formally, it exists. Let us say the effect that we need is not there, and we work at that. And I think that there is kind of challenge. And the second thing is implementation of the initiatives that are here for today and the resistance. Well, not in labor efficiency, but as a client work. And clients, not only external, but also internal clients, these are two gross challenges that we see today. We had a very interesting question, whether you're going to recommend your production to your friends, Severstal. Well, maybe for roofing or some machinery. Well, we gave not a very good result, and for that, this is an indicator that people know that we have problems with client orientation, that we have problems with quality, we have problems with involvement at the lowest level. That is why we have to work with this. Well, actually, we also tried to view these practices that we have in the area of working with staff at the companies participating of national projects, and we made a selection of more than 50 companies in the Russian Federation, asked directors general and HRs about the maturity of financial tools that they use, and we got such a picture. It's clear that this is a poll data. We never measured it specifically. We didn't come and consider this is their personal opinion. But however, if we take as 100% development of some practice, then none of the practices on working with the staff at the company of mid-sized business, not related to raw materials, out of those whom we asked, is not fully developed. So everybody has something where to grow. And this is one of the practices which is at the top. For instance, managing results and and some conclusions and results. It's kind of idea for tutorship, for adaptation. There are always practices where they really have something to work at. At that, truly, there is a very right saying about that very sponge which is penetrated with the culture. Maxim shared this metaphor with us, but I believe this is a very right metaphor. And many companies with whom we communicate and Soviet practice, I remember those from Soviet times, started with the fact that mindset is established at school during a university period, but all our education system now works in a specific way, and we are really willing to listen to expert opinion of Alexei Komisarov about the system of education, about system of training, not inside of the corporation where companies can influence something and elaborate specifically, but namely universities and some professional education. What is the situation there? What is lacking in order to for more and more generation of new workers coming to a company would have different mindset. What do you think it could be? Please share your observations about this. Thank you very much. Good morning, dear colleagues. Each of the experts have already expressed the importance of people for labor efficiency, and I would like to use 4 theses. The first thesis is related to kind of strange thing, but I believe that national project labor efficiency should really considered in a wider sense, maybe as an issue of operation efficiency, because labor efficiency is only part of this issue. Why am I talking about this? Here was a question about an indifferent relation to what you are doing, but I believe it's quite hard to be indifferent to the percentage of labor efficiency increase at the company. We should speak about different indicators, like what our Western colleagues call operation excellence, some operation excellence. Why are we better than other companies in the same industry or the same in the world, in the country? And then it will kind of elevate this theme and make it more attractive, so to speak, for people. If we speak about this, of course, it's necessary. This is the second thesis. It's important for this operational efficiency to be important for future specialists, for that to become value.
And to become this kind of a continuous competence. Maria was talking about the fact that companies really work with different educational programs for employees, but we don't have such a discipline in many of the companies. For example, lean manufacturing is a very important issue, but it's not always the case in many of the companies. We don't have such a comprehensive and overall approach to them. And just before the beginning of the forum, I also addressed this issue, and I sent a message to also to the Ministry for Higher Education, etc. And he said that we should include this issue as a part of the educational programs, which is pretty important. I think that we should really decide on the number of hours that should be given for that matter. But the idea is that we have different ideas and different ways to improve the situation, and this could be one of the ways to do that. So it's very important for every of the students. It doesn't matter whether you want to become, the director of a polyclinic or a factory, etc. It doesn't matter, or just work somewhere. It could be really important. And now, talking about this, we should say that we also could think about different papers and works initiative to launch in the framework of improving such collaboration. We, for example, focused on over 300 cases in this very domain where the different students can be involved, and just to to foster their experience and their work. And it's really great that different enterprises and plants could do something to take great advantage of it. And the third point that I wanted to mention was that in order to clearly for us to understand what productivity is, I think that we could think about it from the perspective of the quality itself. This could be really value-intense, intangible assets. I just want to say that right now we work with Roskачество and FCK, and it would be really great if all those efforts could be brought together and be united to speed up the process. And the next point that I wanted to mention is that we really need to think more about lean manufacturing, about productivity, about quality of work, etc. This is really important. Maxim Reshetnikov was talking a lot about how it organized in different hospitals, polyclinics and schools, but I would like to say that we could also have a good experience of the so-called comfort schools. And as far as I know, so far we have only realized one project in this domain. The results are really interesting, and moreover, I know that they managed to organize it in a way where the efficiency of different schoolmates was really duplicated, and now it amounted to 27%, the teachers 35%. But it's not the most important thing. But when students can see how different efforts are implemented, when you use different approaches to implement your efficiency, it becomes a part of their mentality, and it's really great. It could be used later on in different locations. Doesn't matter what their profession is. And now I would like just to summarize and say that as part of our discussion, we need to come up with the most important result summary, and say that we need to focus more on thinking, on our mentality, and we need to understand that it's really important if we really want to boost the efficiency. Well, actually today we promised you that we're going to have a very important dialogue, and now I would like to give you this opportunity to address your questions to our speakers regarding the productivity, motivation, non-material motivation, etc. If you have such questions, please raise your hands so that our colleagues can approach you with the microphone, or maybe comments. Could you please introduce yourself and ask your question? Перм край. Алсанова Тюпай. I'm head of tax service at the region. Well, initially it was a question for Nikolai, but then I started to think more and more about it. Well, in case, just for you to know, I was quite agree with many of the points that you outlined in part of the speech. But now I'm just thinking about productivity and the effect that can be produced on the whole working process in general. We should say that the market in itself is quite limited, and when productivity grows, then of course we understand that the figures actually grow. It's also we need to diversify it somehow, or to change the market somehow. What about your opinion? Toyota is not a good example, I would say. But generally speaking, I mean, the basic idea behind the productivity and boost of such productivity, if everybody starts to boost such productivity, could it actually lead to any tremendous results? I think that we quite misunderstood each other. When I try to summarize, I basically talked about the culture, and I say that, well, it takes a little bit more to change a culture than just your perception or idea to change the culture, etc. For example, I want to see this kind of figures of those kind of figures. It's not that easy. Well, we are quite the same, and people are quite the same, and have met a lot of people. For example, as deputy director of Rosatom, one of my colleagues we have worked with together for 10 years, and he wasn't quite able to really provide a good quality. And I remember him just standing on the stage and saying, yes, I really want to say that I absolutely fell in love with this project, but he didn't really did everything that he could do, and we somehow need to protect such people, and they are not always those people who really can make a difference. We need to provide them with some ideas, with some programs, etc. That's what I meant to say. It's like, I don't know, an ant house, it's very difficult. You need to fix the way it is all organized, and to bring all those people together. We need to avoid all those efforts to use force, etc. For example, when you have this indicator of 30%, etc., it's not correct. You need to have a different approach to that. I have seen a lot of different approaches, and also from Silverstal. They're trying to do it in a very intelligent way. There's a company, etc., very commercial one. They are very much oriented towards this very value and this approach, but at the same time it is not always organized in the right way. But they try to cut down on the employees. Well, it's not always the good situation, especially when you don't have these ideas of expansion, etc. These are two different things. When we talked about culture, this is like Toyota. You remember in 1998 when they had quite a problem with the crisis, and they felt to complete the plan that we have twice. That was a disaster. I would say that that was quite an example, and we had some other examples as well as in Russia. But just like Roskачество and Protasov Mikhail, we discussed it a lot with him. That was quite a problem. The share of imported goods in our market is quite considerable, and sometimes it amounts to 70%. And when we talk about our productivity, we understand that we can really grow it up. To make it grow a little bit, sometimes we do it based on this import substitution basis approach, etc. But if we look at it globally, then we will understand that there have been a lot of efforts to do that, to just make our productivity grow. We have been talking a lot about the McKinsey approach, about energy savings, etc. But the point is that it turns out that in Russia we pay more, we try to do more, etc. But we cannot really achieve the results that we really wanted, and we need to set the right goals to make something happen. Let's think about the interest of Russia, about our approaches, about our basic ideas, just to make it brilliant for our people. I can see two more hands. Svetlana from Perm Krai, and I also have a question for you. You raised a very important issue. You talked about productivity, about public spending, etc. Maxim Gennadievich, what do you think who actually have such an idea, I mean, as to how we can optimize public spending, I mean, specifically for people who work in this domain and consultants, etc. How do you perceive this request, and if there is none, then how would you tackle it? Well, apparently we do have such requests and applications. We understand that people are not satisfied with different system features, etc., especially when it comes to higher education, etc. When people, yes, apparently we do have such a application and request, but at the same time we understand that administrative as well as political structures, they have to somehow tackle with it and work with these issues in a very efficient way, which is very close to many of the issues that we have. We need to understand how to work it with personnel, with motivation, how to work with financing, etc. We need to understand how to organize it the most efficient way, because the more bikivits we have, the more finance we need. But people, they have to understand what they are paid for and what they can ask money for. When it comes to the educational system, I also work with the payment system, with the different rate systems, etc., whether it's fair or not, and how I mean such work should be paid for. When we have transparent, clear relations with employees, that is really great, and we have to have this win-win situation. Win-win situation. I would say that we should focus on that first and foremost. And the very last question, please introduce yourself. Not the Perm region only. I am here to speak with you from Udmurtia, which is quite close to the Perm region. I have a question about the labor market. The first that the head of Udmurtia said he organized a special program, I mean educational one, just as a study, and now it is one of the obligations for official people as well to do that. I just got a little bit sidetracked, but I want to speak about this from a practical point of view. We have quite a considerable potential and also a very interesting idea regarding this very approach. For example, when you have in a pool, for example, 8 accountants and 2 lawyers, and should we think about it from different perspective and understand how many specialists we have? Isn't it that much? We need to think about outsourcing, about function of the profile organization, and we also think about the productivity program from that perspective. Initially, we talked about 15 enterprises, but now we take it as a kind of a very complicated sort of mixture. Yes, that's something that we really want to dig deeper into, but we don't really understand how it works. And once you are there, you start to propagate different ideas of labor force, etc., and we try to make it more efficient. Petr, please correct me if I'm wrong. For example, you will be responsible for some tax support regarding productivity support and also income tax, etc., 3 or then 10%. So we're trying to make it more attractive. But now that we understand that the ideas are quite there, we're trying to improve it even better. And the last point, but not least, we have a saying, so it's better to run for 2 rubles rather than to stay for 1. It's very important. What I'm talking about, I just want to say that recently you have said that we had a lot of companies join us from the social sector, and now we understand that it accounts for 400 millions. And now we would like to make it bigger and to bring this figure to 300 million. Probably we could attract more companies from the social sphere if it could be actually applied to the social sphere, etc. And also the last question that I want to say, productivity is about both the dominator as well as the figure itself. It's also about the sales and the number of companies that we're talking about. I think that we could accelerate the number of companies from the number of sales revenue that we talked about. Could you please comment on that? So the first thing that you mentioned, you said that you are ready and you agree with the point that have been mentioned there. It's really great. We have already discussed it with this very region, which is very important. I think that our task is a little bit more comprehensive. We're trying to start somewhere to find the right approach to these very problems, and we understand that when certain measures lead to boost of productivity, it's always important. It's always great, and it's very important also to maintain a certain dialogue and to discuss these issues with different industries. We have already discussed it, and we said that this is a practice that has been applied in different industries, but we understand that our federal competences are a little bit limited. We have certain limitations, and we don't have enough opportunities to do that. And the second point is that so far still we have certain resistance, maybe because people, they don't want to get that much involved in that, but still will continue working in that domain. And could I please comment on that? I also wanted to say a few words about the regions and say a few words about that. The active position of the governors really has a direct impact on the whole situation, both in Tatarstan, in Perm, in Nizhny Novgorod, and many other locations. And Alexander Vladimirovich, when we talked about motivation, about impetus, for example, the governor who wakes up at 5 a.m. and goes for some jogging in the morning, that is really cool, because such personalities, they deserve a real pride, and they're ready for that. It means that they're also ready for some other challenges as well.
And there is a point, it's quite noticeable to see this dependence on a position of life of a governor, that is involvement into the issues. And it's nice to talk to such governments. You speak the same language with them, and they understand the theme even deeper, because they come to companies much more in their region, and they feel every cell of any organism in their region. So truly, initiatives such as tax initiatives in some regions, well, thanks a lot for that. Well, thank you, Nikolai. And in a conclusion of our section, I would like to say, to make a conclusion of what we were talking about, we considered labor efficiency from another angle, from the angle of non-material measures, non-material stimulation, And we have just started revealing that. It's the first dialogue that took place today. And I would like to express gratitude to the participants of our session, our speakers. Thanks a lot to everyone, and actually see you at the next sessions.